Hear me out. What if Naruto had a dojutsu? And what if Naruto had the Jougan? How would this impact the Naruto story, you may ask? Well, in today's video, that will be covering exactly that. So I do hope you guys are going to enjoy it. And with that said, let's get into the intro and in with the awesome banger.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
We start our story in the perspective of Naruto after he had just finished pulling off one of his infamous pranks of painting the Hokage monuments. Not only that, but Naruto would have also pretty much mind-effed one of the shopkeepers and taken a bunch of things from his shop. Now this man was currently pretty much chasing him down, and this is when his son, who just so happened to be a ninja, would have ended up pretty much running behind Naruto. At this point, Naruto would be jumping from building to building when inevitably he would end up missing one of his jumps and end up falling straight into a dark like alleyway. Now when he does this, he would end up pretty much hitting his head on a pole and then crashing down to the ground as everything would begin getting hazy and Naruto would close his eyes, passing out. Now, today's story is actually going to be a little bit different than my usual ones because this story is actually going to be having two different paths for you guys to each pick your poison and let me know which backstory you guys would like. On my community tab yesterday, actually not a couple days ago, but yesterday I ended up posting something asking for my subscribers to actually help me with this what if and how the story should start off. There were two stories that stood out to me and I honestly could not pick between one or the other, so I decided to literally do both, and you guys could honestly pick which one you guys like more, and that can be your canon. If you guys like this version or the other version more, then go with whatever one you guys like more. Anyways, the first version is by Amir. His YouTube tag will be up on screen, and the second one is going to be by Akiro. Now we're actually going to be doing Akiro, even though I said it was the second one first. And the way that everything plays out from this point is essentially when Naruto would close his eyes and everything becomes blurry, Naruto would begin to have a strange vision. Naruto would essentially wake up in a plane of existence that is incomprehensible to him. Naruto would feel everything, see everything, and know everything all at the same time, as Naruto simply opens his eyes and there would be a godlike figure standing before Naruto. Now Naruto at this point would literally not be able to comprehend exactly what this even is. One thing that he would see are the eyes. The eyes are very, very, very eminent in the creature, and it would have like a black color eye and its pupil would be like white in color, very similar to the one that Boruto has in the anime against the fight with Kawaki in the future after the time skip. And when Naruto sees this, he would simply have the being stare at him as it would manifest an arm and place its hand over Naruto's eye, to which at this point Naruto would he can't move, he can't do anything, he's just existing. Have you guys ever had sleep paralysis where you're sitting there and you can't do a thing? Well, the being would essentially put Naruto in a paralysis state and hold its hand over his eye. As the second that Naruto would pretty much awaken, Naruto would be standing up in the real world with I was about to say Byakugan, but the Jougan activated, and Naruto would see a puddle very close by to himself. So Naruto would walk over towards it, and when Naruto would stare at the puddle, Naruto would see his reflection. When he sees his reflection, he would see himself, and his left eye had changed. It now looked exactly the same as that godlike being's eye, except an imperfected version, I guess you could say. And that was version 1 by Akiro. He was actually the one who ended up making that one. Props to you, man. I really enjoyed that little the way you ended up making things play out. I'm only really going to be taking out the backstory to how he ends up getting the Jougan, but nonetheless, I appreciate it. And if you comment down below, I will definitely consider pinning you down below. So yeah, that being said though, guys, Path B. So the way that Path B plays out was actually created by Amir Ogunfemi. I'm so sorry if I butchered your name, but the way that everything essentially plays out is Naruto would essentially have a flashback to when he was a baby. Naruto at this point would see the destruction that the Nine Tails would be causing in the village, and suddenly a man with like blonde hair would appear before him. He would have marks and all over his face, and he would simply be staring at Naruto's direction. The next thing that Naruto could see was pretty much Boruto holding his hand over Naruto and like literally ripping his eye out and replacing his with Naruto's eyes. And Boruto also, mind you, ended up saving him from the Nine Tails attack. However, not before Minato and Kushina sacrificed their lives to save a baby Naruto. Now, that said, there is literally no flashback or backstory as to how Boruto even got there, so I'm now currently going to have to explain. The way that everything starts is we have a flashback to how it all started with the final battle between Kawaki and Boruto. At this point, Boruto would be on the losing side of the battle, and at a moment of desperation, he would use the interspatial jutsu that the Jougan gives to get away. However, instead of intending to pretty much teleport him to a different village or something like that, because of all the stress and anger that Boruto was feeling at the moment, he would actually end up going back in time, something Boruto did not think he would have the capability of doing. At this point, Boruto was running extremely low on chakra, and the fight was pretty much almost over. So Boruto would decide that if anybody could stop him, it was his father. Boruto had heard so many stories of how great his father was as a shinobi, how he saved the world once before, and Boruto believes that had the fate that befell his father not came down, he would have been the one who rightfully would have ended up saving the shinobi world. And so, he would end up giving his father, baby Naruto, the Jougan. After this, Boruto would pretty much go back to his original timeline. After a couple of seconds, his body would just warp him back, and he would then be killed by Kawaki, as Momoshiki would end up taking over his body, and that would conclude that timeline. Flashing back to the real world, just like in Path A, Naruto would wake up and see his own reflection in a puddle, only to see that the Jougan was flashing in his eye. Now Naruto at this point, this version of Naruto, the one that has the Jougan, would pretty much just end up looking at himself. And keep in mind, guys, there's no scar on his eye quite yet. That actually ends up happening a lot later on in the story, and there's actually going to be a pretty decently interesting plot point as to how that happens. Still haven't thought about it, but let me know down below in the comments if you guys think of something really interesting. That being said, what would end up going down after this is Naruto seeing these flashes of this eye would completely not understand what's going on. However, Naruto would end up pretty much just like getting up and in pain walking over to his house, to which then we're going to be having a couple like a strange time skip to by the time that Naruto is around, like, let's say 10 years old. Naruto at this point would be 10 years old in the middle of the academy, and he would be doing his infamous spar against Sasuke. On this particular day, Sasuke would have ended up throwing a shuriken at Naruto's direction, and in a spontaneous moment, Naruto's Jougan ability would activate. Naruto would see the shuriken coming at him in such a slow motion, seeing the exact target that it was going out, its trajectory, its time of impact. Naruto would stick his finger through the shuriken hole, and it would spin in his hands, as the entire class would just be impressed as to how Naruto caught a shuriken mid-air with one finger. Naruto at this point would snap out of the Jougan state, to which Sasuke would come in and kick Naruto out of the circle, thus winning the battle. A couple more times of this would come basically end up going down, with Naruto pretty much ends up awakening the Jougan at spontaneous moments without having the ability to truly even control it whatsoever, would continue going on over and over until inevitably the day of the graduation exam would go down, and Naruto would end up inevitably fighting against Mizuki to save Iruka's life after Iruka had the Demon Wind Shuriken thrown at him. Now, this time, things would actually end up playing out a whole lot differently. Naruto, instead of activating the multi-shadow clone jutsu, instead his eye, due to sensing the imminent danger before him of Mizuki, would end up pretty much activating, and Mizuki would come in with a kunai, as Mizuki would end up pretty much slashing at the direction of Naruto's eye, and it would end up pretty much cutting the skin, leaving Naruto that famous scar. Psych, y'all really thought? Absolutely not. Mizuki was not going to be the one who gives it to him. What would actually end up happening is Naruto, like a boss, would end up actually dodging Mizuki's slice, grabbing Mizuki's wrist, and pretty much flipping him onto Mizuki's back. As Naruto, at this point, his eye would pretty much flash electricity through it, and Naruto would proceed to pretty much punch down at Mizuki's face, just immediately knocking Mizuki out. Iruka, seeing this, would be like, "Naruto, you beat him." And when Naruto turned towards Iruka's direction, Iruka would see a brief flash of the Jougan before Naruto's dojutsu would deactivate. At this point, what would end up going down is Iruka would end up promoting Naruto to be a genin, and Naruto would then go on to be placed onto Team 7, to which they would have their introductions, and they would then end up meeting at the bell test area for their little examination. The way that this all ends up playing out is basically the same way that it does in canon. Now, honestly, I could sit here and say that Naruto masters his Jougan at an early age, or that it ends up spontaneously appearing due to Kakashi fighting against Naruto. However, realistically speaking, the real changes to the story will not be having a huge impact, or Naruto will not be fully mastering the Jougan until at least Shippuden. So most of the activations of the Jougan from this point forward are going to be varied and just completely random. So nothing ends up happening here. Team 7 would still end up passing due to Sakura pretty much feeding Naruto, and then Sasuke, no, due to Sasuke feeding Naruto, and then Sakura pretty much chiming in, being like, "Here, Naruto." And so the Team 7 would pretty much end up passing the Genin bell test. That said, they would then proceed to go on to 2 weeks worth of just garbage missions. And this is when one day Naruto would pretty much wake up in a mindscape to see that figure, or a figure, not exactly the same figure from plot point A, but a Otsutsuki member, one that we know very well, but one that Naruto should not know whatsoever. Naruto would see a brief silhouette of a figure of a man, but it would then fade as all he was able to see with his Byakugan-like eyes. And when Naruto sees that, he would think what that was. However, Naruto has no time to think about those things because he just now had to go catch a cat mid-air, and Naruto would do so, getting scratched up in the face tons. At this point, Naruto would begin walking home, as this version of Naruto would actually end up deciding that he wants to have a little bit of a drip change. So when Naruto's walking through the village, he would end up seeing a sweater on display from a random shop. Naruto goes over to it, and using the money that he's earned from his couple of last missions, he would end up buying himself a fully black hoodie with a little pocket inside of it and a pretty comfy hoodie on the back. It seemed pretty durable, and it was just all black. It was pretty cool, honestly. He also saw a matching set of pants to go with it, and Naruto immediately upon seeing this would decide that honestly he really likes it. So the next time that Team 7 would end up seeing Naruto, when is pretty much the time that they end up meeting Tazuna in the office and Tazuna insults Team 7, they would actually see Naruto and be like, "Yo, that actually, doesn't look half bad." Naruto at this point doesn't actually look exactly like what he looks like in the original story, because this version of Naruto, his hair would be a little longer, so it would have an effect where it kind of gets in his face a little bit, and it just has a really cool look to it. Naruto wears his hoodie at all times now, and that's pretty much the only thing that Naruto wears nowadays. That being said, what ends up going down is Team 7 would be assigned the C rank mission, and the team would end up meeting with Kakashi the very next day by the gates. Now, it's at this current moment that the entire team would end up pretty much be told that they need to bring this man to the land of the waves and make sure that he builds his bridge in peace. To which the team would agree, and like I said, the next day they would end up meeting everybody pretty much back with Tazuna. At this point, they would end up making their way towards the land of the waves, when suddenly they would be attacked by the twin demon brothers. Now, when the demon brothers would end up inevitably arriving, Naruto's Jougan would activate due to the danger around. And when the brothers would end up actually rushing at Naruto, this time, instead of actually being impaled by a poisonous kunai, Naruto would be able to actually react to the movement and see the second brother pretty much coming right at him. Naruto would receive a huge buff in terms of physical ability, catching the brother's hand and then twisting it, completely breaking the wrist, before jumping up into the air and doing a split kick. The infamous Uchiha split kick, causing both of the brothers to be taken out before Sasuke was even able to react. Sasuke, seeing this, would pretty much inner monologue to himself, thinking that Naruto's like a totally different person. Now, none of the team was actually able to see Naruto's Jougan activate, but Naruto, feeling the power and having the Jougan active for a little longer than normal, would feel this insane sensation of overwhelming just power going through his body. And so Naruto would, instead of being told scaredy cat by Sasuke, Sasuke would pretty much give him a head nod, respecting Naruto, or not respecting him, but as a sign of respect. And Naruto would then proceed to like look at Kakashi, to which Kakashi would then question Tazuna, and moments later they would end up pretty much rushing in to the forest, where they would inevitably end up encountering a white bunny. Now, Sakura this time would be the one to throw a kunai at it, sensing weird movement around them, and everybody seeing that it was a snow bunny would end up actually laughing at Sakura, Naruto included, to which at this point, a thick fog would end up pretty much enveloping all of them, to which a giant blade would come at their direction, and Kakashi, pretty much having his heightened senses, would end up telling the team to dodge. Everybody would do so, and Zabuza Momoichi would appear right before them, before saying, "Kakashi Hatake." The team would immediately look at Zabuza's direction, as they have those exasperated gasps that all anime characters do, where they're like, "Oh," you know what I mean? That sounded so bad, but you know, they would have that moment, and immediately after this, the team would pretty much proceed to watch as Zabuza and Kakashi end up monologuing for a second, before then getting into a brief fight, where Kakashi would end up being put in the water prison jutsu. Immediately after this, Kakashi and Naruto, both understanding the fact that they need to save Kakashi or get out of there, would both look at each other before kind of understanding and creating a plan spontaneously, both literally knowing what they're going to be doing without exchanging any words. Kakashi would be pretty much regretting all of his life decisions that brought him here, pretty much saying to Minato inside of his head that, you know, he's really sorry for the way that things turned out, and that his son is going to be dying because of his incompetence. Luckily, however, Naruto could turn into a shuriken thrown at Zabuza by Kakashi, no, not Kakashi, but Sasuke, and Naruto would end up saving Kakashi just like he does in the original. Immediately after this, Kakashi would end up getting free and would proceed to have a fight with Zabuza that pretty much goes exactly like it does to the original. Nothing changes. Immediately after all of this would occur, Haku would end up pretty much making his presence known to the team by throwing a couple of senbon to Zabuza's direction, immediately knocking him out and causing the entire team to stop for a moment to immediately look at Haku's direction. After all this happens, Haku would immediately turn his attention towards Team 7, as he would proceed to tell them all that he's a hidden mistracking ninja, and inform the team that he's going to be taking him to pretty much get all of his information out of him, to which Naruto would look at Zabuza's direction and Haku and question the truth to the statement, being like, yo, like, why don't you do your job here? I've read in, you know, a couple books that y'all are supposed to like perform your duties immediately. To which at this point, Haku would get kind of nervous, but Kakashi would end up pretty much kind of having a sweat drop, realizing that he's almost out of chakra. He would look towards Naruto's direction and tell him not to worry about things, before then pretty much passing out after Haku gets out of there with Zabuza. And when he would wake up about a week later, he would inform Team 7 of his reasonings for not questioning Haku any further, telling the team that he was realistically out of chakra, and that had they ended up getting into a altercation with him, they probably would have lost. Immediately following these events, Kakashi would end up teaching Team 7 the abilities of tree walking and water walking, to which, actually no, not water walking, Naruto learns that later on by Jiraiya, right? Yeah, he does. So instead, what I'm going to be saying is they end up learning a couple things, you know what I mean? Kakashi would particularly take a little bit of an interest in Naruto because he thinks that for a brief second he saw dojutsu in his eye a little bit ago, and he's not really too sure because his mind might have played a game on him, but he saw him when he was on a mission with Team 7 a little bit ago. But regardless of the fact, they would pretty much proceed to just kind of get more prepared for Zabuza and Haku's arrival, because this time around, Kakashi tells the team of his hunch that they will definitely most likely be back, and so Team 7 this time around ends up actually being a lot more prepared than they were in the bridge. This time, however, Naruto does not end up staying back with the Inari and Tsunami at the house due to him pretty much oversleeping, and instead what would end up happening is Inari and Tsunami would actually end up being captured by the thugs. Now what would happen immediately after this is the village hidden in the mist, I believe it's what it's called, no, not the mist, but the waves, would actually end up interfering and saving them. They would have finally had enough of Gato's tyranny, and they would end up pretty much jumping in to save them both. This leads to Team 7 being on the bridge, and then finally the thick fog would come in. Zabuza at this point would make his presence known before immediately going into fight against Kakashi. Haku would then begin to fight against Sasuke, and at this point Sakura would be, pretty much holding a kunai right in front of Tazuna, quote unquote, protecting him. Now, it's at this moment that everybody would kind of look at each other before being like, all right, so what do we do now? And Naruto at this point would proceed to kind of just be questioning who he helps, whether he should help Kakashi or Sasuke. Immediately after this, Naruto seeing Kakashi struggle against Zabuza and Sasuke pretty much struggling against Haku, Naruto would pretty much decide to go in and help Kakashi. At this point, Naruto and Kakashi would both immediately start pressing Zabuza, to which Zabuza would create a bunch of clones, and Naruto would immediately try to do this same process. However, Zabuza's clones would immediately overpower Naruto, and this would lead to Naruto realizing that this is quite a big fish that he's trying to fry. And by that, I mean, he's kind of biting off a little bit more than he can chew. So what would end up pretty much happening after this is Naruto would begin getting a little bit more overwhelmed, and he would pretty much start getting put on the back foot. Naruto actually jumping in to help Kakashi would have actually thrown Kakashi off more and actually done less good than Naruto was intending. Naruto was essentially just getting in the way, and due to his ability or a lack of teamwork, he actually didn't know how to fight with Kakashi in a way that would be beneficial. So instead, Naruto just got in the way, and now Naruto was currently inches away from losing his left eye. However, that's when the Jougan's abilities would end up pretty much snapping, and Naruto in a brief instant would slightly be able to dodge his eye from getting cut, completely just getting destroyed. Because what would end up happening is Zabuza with his blade would bring it up and it would slash Naruto, leaving him that scar that he has, but it wouldn't actually end up hitting the eye because of the fact that the Jougan was able to slightly react just like a milliseconds before Naruto's literal eye just got completely GG'd, you know what I mean? And the whole series would have ended right there. The series would have then been called "What if Naruto had one eye?" No, but seriously though, what would end up happening after this is Naruto seeing this would begin seeing the Jougan eye appear clearly. Kakashi would end up noticing this immediately after, and he would tell Naruto to go and help Sasuke. Naruto would nod at this request before immediately then teleporting inside of the crystal ice mirrors. And when Naruto does this, he would simply not question it, because it's just what he is doing is nothing but pure instinct. Due to the Boruto manga, I believe it is, only giving us a few brief moments where Boruto actually uses the abilities of the Jougan, all we truly know about these abilities are the fact that it gives him kind of the same abilities as the Hyuga dojutsu, like a lot of vision. It gives him the sensory abilities of Sage mode, where he can sense negative emotions and stuff like that. And it also gives him the ability to teleport and see portals that are about to open into dimensions, stuff like that. So Naruto would actually end up teleporting right into Haku, and he would lift his arm as a portal would appear in the mirror, which would actually start to kind of not a portal would appear. How do I explain this better? What would end up happening is Naruto, having this new range of vision, is actually able to see Haku moving at these insane speeds. Keep in mind, this version of Sasuke hasn't even activated the Sharingan, because Naruto doesn't actually end up getting skewered by a bunch of small Senbon. Instead, Naruto starts to be able to see Haku's movements as if he is literally moving in slow motion. And Naruto would take out a bunch of kunai before throwing them at Haku's direction, actually hitting him. Now, Haku would then teleport out of one of the mirrors before going into another one at just supersonic speeds, and Naruto at this moment would end up deciding that this is, you know, enough is enough. Naruto would weave a bunch of hand signs, like he just starts weaving them. Like normally this would give like some insane explanation of how like Naruto, well, how did Naruto even learn how to do this? But let's just link this to the Jougan's abilities. We have seen the Jougan show signs of kind of electricity coming off of the eye, so I'm just going to be adding that to one of the abilities that the Jougan gives access to. As the series goes on, you guys are probably going to be seeing me add more and more powers to the abilities of the Jougan as things go further, and I'm just kind of going to be speculating as to what the Jougan's abilities are as time goes on and on with the series. So as I stated before, the Jougan at this point would proceed to pretty much light up in color as Naruto pretty much performs a very powerful lightning jutsu, which would shatter the ice mirrors completely and actually hit Haku when he was midway of going into one of them. This would cause Haku to pretty much be sent flying away, and Haku would pretty much start spinning on the ground as he just like starts getting flung, and Naruto would then rush in at the direction of Haku before he would then pretty much proceed to like throw a final punch, knocking Haku out cold. At this point, we would then see Kakashi having his fight with Zabuza pretty much almost end, and at this moment, Kakashi would say Chidori before piercing Zabuza's heart with his Chidori blade. Haku at this point would be unconscious, therefore the moment with Zabuza actually helping with the attack against Gato's men would not end up happening. Instead, when this all goes down, Naruto would create like literally hundreds of multi-shadow clones, and they would actually end up taking care of Gato's men, and Gato would actually be taken to the people of the Land of the Waves for them to pretty much bestow their own punishment on Gato. A lot of Gato's money would be used to actually help restore the Land of the Waves, and the people would start getting out of their impoverished state really quickly. The bridge would still be named the Great Naruto Bridge, and Team 7 would end up making their way back to Konoha immediately after this. Now guys, today's story is actually in a little bit of a weirder format than what I usually do, so actually I mean, let me know what you guys think about this. Do you guys like this like straightforward format, or do you guys like more of the storytelling stuff? Because if I was to do this format that I'm getting into, the stories would go by way quicker, and I would actually be able to pump out more like realistic scenarios instead of just kind of making stuff up. Maybe I can try this out. And one thing that I actually want to ask you guys is, would you guys want me to actually get into the process of adding the characters on the screen of each one of the videos, like putting the characters up on screen when anything at all is happening? If you guys would like something like that, then definitely let me know down below in the comments, and I can definitely consider doing something like that in the near future. Not exactly too soon, but in the near future. That being said, what would end up going down after this is the team would end up pretty much arriving back in Konoha, to which Kakashi would actually end up informing Hiruzen of the fact that he is like 100% sure that Naruto has a dojutsu that pretty much it looks very similar to that of the Hyuga's Byakugan. However, Kakashi is quite unsure of what exactly it is. Hiruzen at this moment would have a talk with Kakashi, pretty much going down to the point of he wants to talk to Naruto, to which Naruto would then immediately after be summoned, and when he is summoned, they would immediately try to activate his dojutsu without any success. When they do this, they would pretty much end up realizing that Naruto's dojutsu activates only whenever, like, it activates at random, and most likely one of the triggers of it is danger. A moment of like huge distress is what pretty much ends up being the catalyst to the activation of the Jougan. And they don't even know this at all, so instead what ends up happening is Kakashi would try to help train Naruto to use his dojutsu, but there would really be no training involved since they couldn't figure out how to even activate it. And instead what ends up happening is Kakashi would end up pretty much fighting against Naruto, pushing him to a state where Naruto was going to die if he didn't do something about the attack. So when Kakashi ended up throwing a like huge water dragon jutsu at him, Naruto like got hit by it head on. He then rolled on the ground before like picking his head up and noticing that like this giant like mud wall was coming at him at quick speeds and was about to crush him. So Naruto pretty much spontaneously activated the Jougan before his instincts just kicked in, and Naruto jumped up into the air. He kicked off of the mud wall and then rushed at Kakashi's direction before throwing a kunai up in the air, throwing 2 kicks, a couple of punches, and causing Kakashi to pretty much have to be on the back foot. Naruto would then catch the kunai mid-air as he would throw it right at Kakashi. Kakashi would end up catching it before the kunai or no, he would try to catch it before the kunai would split into like a bunch, and it pretty much just turns into many mid-air. It would hit Kakashi, and Kakashi at this point would like, he would have actually ended up taking quite a significant amount of damage. I mean, kunais, they do good, decent they do mid damage to Kakashi, right? Let's just say that they do mid damage, and Kakashi is actually really impressed at the fact that Naruto was able to come up with an idea such as that mid battle. And so Naruto would then look at his hand before thinking, you know, is there more? Like, is there more to this? You know what I mean? And quick thing I want to actually ask you guys, actually, nah, I don't think I want to involve the karma seal into this what if whatsoever. I was actually about to ask you guys if you guys would want to see that, but I don't know. That would change the story. That would be more like, what if Naruto had the karma seal and the Jougan? And I don't know if that's something you guys would want, or if you guys would want a separate series of what if Naruto had a karma seal. Regardless of the fact though, let's get back into the story. So immediately following these events, what would end up happening is they would all end up getting informed of the Chunin exams by Kakashi, and they would all pretty much end up agreeing to be entered into the Chunin exams. This time around, the encounter with Kankuro and Konohamaru would never end up going down, so they never even end up meeting Gaara before the Chunin exams, and they would end up just kind of going to the Chunin exams ground where Lee and Sasuke would end up happening. Sasuke would have his pride broken even more due to the fact that this time around he doesn't even have a Sharingan, and this weakened version of Sasuke is actually going to be at a heavy disadvantage when it comes to one of the upcoming fights against Orochimaru. What would end up going down after these events is something not exactly too crazy, but something that's definitely worth considering. They would all end up just kind of taking the written portion, to which this version of Naruto, when he is actually given the option of cheating by Hinata, yep, this is the super significant event that changes. He says, I'll think about it. And then he proceeds to not think about it and just be like, believe it. So yeah, they all end up pretty much being told by Anko about the forest of death, to which all of them would end up having to sign these waivers saying that they give their consent to die here if such an event was to occur. So what ends up going down after this is Team 7 would end up pretty much rushing into the forest. Naruto would go off to take a leak. Sasuke would end up pretty much saying, hey you dope, here's a code. And Orochimaru would come in with a transformation jutsu before pretty much failing due to the fact that he actually repeated the code word for word. And so what ends up happening is Sasuke throws a kunai at him saying, that's not the real Naruto. Naruto would have never actually been able to memorize that. Orochimaru would also be like, you're good. Before Sasuke would say not only that, but Naruto wears his ninja pouch on his left leg, not his right. And Orochimaru would notice this before being like, you caught me. Orochimaru reveals his identity. Team 7 would not quite understand the scope of the situation that they're in. And it is not until Orochimaru pretty much starts letting out a bunch of bloodlust that Team 7 would finally understand exactly what their predicament is. At this moment, Sasuke would start getting way too terrified of the bloodlust that Orochimaru was giving off. And at this point, Orochimaru would pretty much be getting ready to throw kunai at Sasuke. At this point, Sasuke would be wanting to move, but he simply cannot do so. So he would end up stabbing himself in the leg with his kunai to overcome the fear with pain. To which at this moment, Sasuke would end up running away from Orochimaru, and Orochimaru would sit there thinking that maybe this prey is not so helpless. After all of this would happen, Orochimaru would pretty much end up locating Sasuke and Sakura, saying to them that running away from him is inevitable and that his young Uchiha body will be his. At this point, Sasuke would end up pretty much telling Orochimaru that he doesn't want to, he doesn't even need to fight him or anything, he'll just give him the scroll, it's not that deep. So Orochimaru would pretty much stand away from Sasuke, acting as if maybe he might take up that offer. And simultaneously, as this is all happening, Naruto would pretty much have already taken out the gigantic snake with relative ease in this version. A lot easier than what he did in canon. This version of Naruto doesn't actually get eaten by the snake because Naruto was able to sense the danger this time and actually jump out of the snake's reach. At this point, Naruto would be making his way back to the team, and when he finally arrives, Sasuke would have offered Orochimaru the scroll and would pretty much have already tossed it to Orochimaru. As the scroll is mid-air, Naruto would end up saying no, as he would catch the scroll. At this point, Naruto would turn towards Sasuke as he would punch him directly in the face, sending Sasuke flying back before then saying, "You're not Sasuke. The Sasuke I know would have fought against Orochimaru," before Naruto then turns to give Orochimaru a death stare and then lunges at Orochimaru's direction, trying to fight Orochimaru off. At this point, Orochimaru would start making like literal child's play out of Naruto, as he would just proceed to start pretty much fondling Naruto. Like, he just completely outclasses him in every way, shape, and form. And Naruto was getting angrier and angrier. He's never exactly been put in a position where he was just this utterly outmatched. Sure, he fought against Zabuza and Haku, but even then, he had a slight chance of winning. This is a complete different kind of monster. It's a sort of immovable object. It's as if Naruto was trying to move a mountain with his bare hands. Naruto can't quite see the end of this man's power. So Naruto would start getting enraged, and as he starts fighting Orochimaru, Naruto's eyes would start beaming a bright red color. And this is when Orochimaru would realize, the Nine Tails, eh? Before he would then pretty much go in to hit Naruto with a 5-pronged seal. Before Sasuke, seeing this all go down in front of him, would throw a kunai at Sasuke saying, "You're right, Naruto. I would have jumped in and helped you. The real me wouldn't be afraid of a fight. If we die here, so be it. I wasn't meant to go any further than this." Before he then jumps into the battle, and Naruto was given just a couple of seconds to pretty much breathe. Naruto and Sasuke would end up both start pressing Orochimaru, and Orochimaru, even with both of these ninjas rushing at him at the same time, would continue making he would pretty much make light work out of them as he dodges the kicks, he catches their attacks, he pretty much counter attacks, he uses shadow clones to rush at their directions, and finally Sasuke would end up shooting a fireball jutsu at Orochimaru before his fake mask or costume would pretty much end up fading. That's when Orochimaru's real form would be revealed, and it would kind of be way more scary than what they thought they were facing. So Naruto and Sasuke would both be put on the back foot, and as they're staring at Orochimaru would begin weaving hand sides rapidly before he then rushes at Sasuke and goes to bite his neck. His neck would literally stretch as Orochimaru just bites down onto Sasuke, and Sasuke would then writhe in pain on the ground. Naruto's eyes would start pretty much like flashing red over and over and over as his heart would start beating out of his chest, and out of nowhere, a full tail would emerge from Naruto's back, before at the same time the Jougan would awaken in Naruto, and Orochimaru would see one red eye and one blue eye in each eye respectively, before Orochimaru says, "The Byakugan?" At this point, Naruto would rush at Orochimaru in unimaginable speeds, causing Orochimaru to actually step back and get hit with a full force punch to the face. Orochimaru at this point would get up and he would say, "No, that's not the Byakugan. What is that?" Before Orochimaru would start pretty much getting extremely excited, saying, "What is that jutsu you are using?" And he starts fighting against Naruto back and forth. Keep in mind, Four Tails Naruto in Shippuden wasn't able to press Orochimaru even when he had like no arms, I believe. Did he have arms? Did he not? I honestly can't remember, but I'm pretty sure, if memory serves me right, Orochimaru had no arms and he was still able to, no, I think he did have arms. So let's just go with that. Regardless of whether he did or didn't have arms, Orochimaru was able to pretty much keep up with a four-tailed Naruto who was going absolutely berserk and shooting Biju bomb level attacks at him. So a Naruto who was a lot younger, only using one tails of the nine tails of chakra, as well as having the Jougan activated at this moment, would, while posing a small threat to Orochimaru, wouldn't exactly be something that Orochimaru is quite scared of. Orochimaru would be studying these movements, and through further inspection, Orochimaru would say, "That's a brand new Kekkei Genkai. Its powers are a mystery. I must find out what secrets it holds." And Naruto and Orochimaru would start getting into more and more of a battle before Naruto says, "Get away from Sasuke!" As he roars that in an ominous tone, and a second tail would appear behind Naruto, before Naruto at this point would pretty much rush at Orochimaru, beginning to get way faster. Now Orochimaru would start throwing attack after attack at Naruto's direction, but Naruto's Jougan ability would actually be able to predict and counter these attacks that Orochimaru was shooting at him, like at this current time. Naruto would start losing himself to the powers of the Nine Tails before one little part of him would resonate within himself and tell him that this is a battle that's not going to be won by sheer power. So instead, what Naruto would do is pretty much set Orochimaru up by throwing a kunai, to which Orochimaru was thrown off guard, teleporting behind Orochimaru, causing Orochimaru to say, "Magnificent." It grants teleportation. Naruto's eyes would flash up electricity-like color before Naruto would say, "Die!" And like this Chidori-like attack would appear in Naruto's hand before he would then proceed to hit at Orochimaru's direction. Orochimaru would end up pretty much jumping out of his old body, as that body that Naruto just hit got like thrown like very, very far. And at this moment, Naruto would end up getting just enough space to go grab Sakura, Sasuke, before he then weaves hand signs and gets out of there immediately, leaving no traces behind. Orochimaru, seeing this, would think, "Amazing. I must have that dojutsu. I must find out every secret it holds." That was unlike anything I've ever seen. It grants him more abilities other than visual prowess. Orochimaru at this point would think, the Uchiha now is only going to be a second when it comes to his objective. And so from here, Orochimaru would end up pretty much leaving and not even have the fight against Anko like he does in the original. At this point, Team 7 would end up actually escaping, and Naruto would end up passing out due to fatigue. He would end up waking up hours later, and Sakura would be pretty much having a towel over his head, as she also has one over Sasuke's head. And when Naruto wakes up, his dojutsu, the Jougan, would activate before he looks at himself in a river and sees the Jougan plain as day, saying that he hasn't seen that eye since he was like 8, or since he can remember. And so from here, Sakura would actually end up telling Naruto that, you know, that Jougan ability is something incredible. Naruto would say, "Jougan?" Before Sakura would say, "Oh, I just took the liberty of making the name for it." Before Naruto would say, "You know, I actually kind of like that." And Sakura would just give him like a half-ass smile before she would proceed to say, "We need to take care of Sasuke." Naruto would say that he's going to put Sasuke on his back and they're going to go look for a scroll so they can go to the main tower and get him medical attention. It's at this moment that the Sound 4 Genins would arrive, and it would pretty much be Naruto versus the Sound Genins, as they end up pretty much just looking, as there's an onlooker nearby. This onlooker would be Rock Lee, and when Rock Lee ends up noticing that, you know, all they have is Sakura and Naruto, Rock Lee, wanting to have a good like look in front of Sakura, would jump down before saying, "These odds are uneven," you know, saying that he'll help him out. From here, Naruto and Rock Lee and Sakura, even though, you know, she doesn't really help much, would pretty much end up fighting off the Sound 4 Genin, and Naruto would end up thanking Lee for his help. Before Lee would tell Sakura if she was proud of him, this Sakura didn't even do anything and she didn't even have to cut her hair, so she is pretty happy at that fact. And Naruto and Rock Lee would both share this kind of like understanding and respect for each other, before Naruto would look towards Lee and say, "Thank you." At this point, Lee would say to give it his all in the Chunin exams is that he'll be seeing him later on. He wants to fight him at his fullest, as he would then say to make sure that Sasuke gets healed up as well. It's at this point that they would grab the Sound 4 scroll and end up making their way towards the Chunin exams tower, before meeting Iruka as well as Kakashi. Kakashi would then proceed to do the curse mark seal on him, which pretty much works on Sasuke's willpower. So if his willpower is strong enough, the curse mark won't show. If it's weak, it'll show. That being said, though, they would end up having the 1 month battles, the battles before the 1 month, where all of them pretty much have to fight in the preliminaries. When it comes to how these fights all go down, Sasuke fight pretty much goes exactly the same. In this version of events, what ends up actually changing is Naruto and Kiba's fight. This one is actually an easier fight, and this version of Naruto is actually a little bit stronger than the one in the original. So using his abundance of chakra and the multi-shadow clone jutsu would actually end up pulling a win over Kiba in a reasonable fashion, not winning due to plot convenience or because of gas, okay? So after that said, what ends up pretty much going down after these events is the Rock Lee versus Gaara fight. Now the Rock Lee and Gaara fight would end up going just like it does in the original up until the end. This time, Naruto would actually interfering in the battle before Rock Lee even had the chance to get to the state where he had his arm and legs broken, and Naruto would end up jumping in there, pretty much pretty much putting himself in the way of the sand to get hit with it and tank the attack for Lee. But Guy Sensei would actually appear before them both and pretty much send the sand flying away from them with a kick, saying that that's enough. Somebody interfered and Rock Lee loses. Before Rock Lee is just like passed out on the ground, and Naruto would end up looking at Lee and just following him to the medical room where Rock Lee would then get treated, and this version of Lee would not even end up needing Tsunade's help to remain a ninja. This Lee was actually saved by Naruto thanks to Lee saving Naruto back when. And so Naruto's debt would be paid, and when it comes to the Hinata versus Neji fight, that would go exactly as it does in canon. The Jounin instructors would stop Neji, and Naruto would vow to destroy Neji in the semi-finals before the 1 month of training would commence. And from here, Kakashi would try to throw Naruto to train with Ebisu, to which Naruto would say, yeah, not doing it. He would end up meeting Jiraiya like halfway through it, and the 1 month training with Jiraiya would actually end up going just like it does in the original. He ends up learning about summonings, and he also ends up learning about the powers of the Nine Tails, actually being able to control the cloak of the Nine Tails, not the one-tailed cloak, but the base weakest cloak that there is. So Naruto at this point, you know, he has a little bit of a boost to his power. Not only that, but this version of Naruto would have actually trained with Jiraiya a little bit more seriously, because this version of Jiraiya takes even more interest in Naruto because of that eye that he has. See, if you guys remember the prophecy, it was prophesied that a boy with a blue eyes or blue eye would actually end up saving the world someday. And Jiraiya actually saw a glimpse of the Jougan once when it activated randomly. Not due to danger or anything, but it just happened. Y'all remember when Boruto woke up one day and the Jougan was there? Yeah, it was pretty much kind of like that. So keep that in mind. This version of Jiraiya put in a little bit more interest in Naruto, and they actually ended up finding out Naruto's chakra affinity, which led to Naruto learning a little bit more taijutsu and actually learning the wind bullet jutsu and the gale palm. So this version of Naruto has 2 more jutsus at his disposal when it comes to the Neji fight. Now, when the Neji fight ends up going down, at first, everything would pretty much go kind of like it does in the original. Neji would preach about destiny and how it's his destiny to win this battle, and it's Naruto's destiny to lose this battle. At this point, Naruto would end up pretty much rebuttaling this by saying that nobody's destiny is set in stone and that he's going to be physical proof of that, before then activating the powers of the Nine Tails and telling Neji that he better be ready for this, before Naruto would then start moving at unimaginable speeds, and Neji's abilities to counter Naruto would pretty much be rendered useless. Naruto's moving so fast that Neji's attacks would not be able to keep up with Naruto. His eyes could, but Neji's body, physically, he just could not do so. And so, the win would end up going to Naruto Uzumaki after Naruto would land a barrage of hits and attacks and then end it off by kicking Neji square into the ground, causing Neji to get knocked out. After this, we end up having the fated battle between Sasuke and Gaara. This would end up going just like it does in the original, leading to Gaara running away into the forest, Sasuke and Naruto rushing after him, and the death of Hiruzen into the hands of Orochimaru. The only real change that happens to the story is regarding to Naruto and Sasuke's battle against Gaara, and this version of Naruto would have actually been able to keep up with Gaara. However, once Gaara starts pretty much overwhelming him just like he did in the original, this version of Naruto would actually step up and coat himself with the cloak of the Nine Tails, also summoning Gamabunta, and then they would end up taking Gaara out swiftly, before then attending to Sasuke's wounds. And just to let you guys know, Sasuke actually ended up learning the Sharingan, learning to awaken it when he fought against Orochimaru. I completely forgot to announce that, but he did out of fear, because emotions bring that stuff out of them. That being said, that's how he ended up learning the Chidori, and that's why that went like it did in the original. That being said, this version of Sasuke now has officially caught up to the canon counterpart, and Naruto actually did end up using the abilities of the Jougan when it came down to the fight against Gaara. To finish Gaara off, instead of just landing a punch or a headbutt, he would have actually used the teleportation jutsu that the Jougan gives the user, and with lightning, he would have shocked Gaara into waking up, causing him and Gaara to drop down to the floor, and then Naruto would hit Gaara with that juicy Talk no Jutsu. That would pretty much end up concluding this entire arc, and from here, literally nothing would end up actually changing in the story of Naruto. You guys might be asking, yo, Zether, it almost seems as if the story of Naruto is pretty much going like it does in canon. Now, the reason for that is because this version of Naruto can't actually whip the Jougan out whenever and wherever he pleases. This version of Naruto still has absolutely no control, and up to this point, there hasn't been any moment where Naruto has realized how it is that the Jougan works, or even put any time or thought into dojutsus or any of those things whatsoever. So now is a perfect moment to actually start getting into that kind of stuff. So what ends up actually finally starting to change in this story is that even though Hiruzen ends up dying and they need a new Kage, Jiraiya would actually end up pretty much asking Naruto to go with him. However, this version of Naruto would actually end up opting to, to stay in the village and actually learn a thing or two about dojutsus, saying to Jiraiya that he could just take Sasuke with him. And so this would actually lead to a different change in the story, where Sasuke is the one who actually ends up going with Jiraiya, and they actually end up creating a bond. They would still end up running into Lady Tsunade, and when it comes to the fight against Orochimaru and Kabuto and all that stuff, that still ends up going down, except Sasuke is the one who's there, and he ends up hitting Kabuto with a Chidori. So yeah, by the way, one thing that does change is the deal. That never ends up happening, and instead Jiraiya, by saving Tsunade ends up agreeing to end up going to the village and becoming the Kage for Konoha. That being said, what ends up following these events is pretty much Naruto stayed in the village, which means that he had about like 1 or 2 weeks worth of trying to figure out what his dojutsu even is. So during this time, Hiruzen would actually end up asking the leader of the Hyuga clan, Hiyashi Hyuga, to actually try to get the dojutsu out of Naruto. And so Naruto would end up spending a couple of weeks actually with Hisashi before they would actually end up pretty much finally, for like after the second day of training with Hiyashi would actually ask Naruto if he knows any way that the Jougan activates. Naruto says that it activates out of necessity, like now and then, but that he hasn't quite been able to like just make it activate on its own. So Hiyashi would end up telling Naruto that he's gonna make Naruto wish that he died if that dojutsu doesn't activate. And so from here, Hiyashi would rush at Naruto and start landing blow after blow consecutively, pretty much obliterating Naruto's chakra path before Naruto would awaken the powers of the Kyuubi, and then the Jougan would activate simultaneously. At this point, the Kyuubi's chakra-like aura would begin changing to more of a blue-like color, and Naruto would look at Hiyashi before saying, "Fine, you want to fight? I'll give you one," before wiping blood off of his mouth and rushing at Hiyashi's direction, saying bam, 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 as he says 1 hit, 2 hit, 3 hit, 4 hit, 5 hit, pretty much mocking Hiyashi. And Hiyashi this whole time is trying to analyze exactly what this dojutsu is. Naruto would have landed about 15 blows on Hiyashi before he starts deflecting things with his like omnidirectional deflection jutsu. I forgot what it was called. The 360 palm. Yeah, I think that's what it called. I'm not 100% positive, but all I know is Hiyashi was actually able to, counteract Naruto, and then look at Naruto as Naruto slightly calmed down and looked at Hiyashi's direction. Hiyashi would say that this jutsu, what is it? It's unlike anything that the world has ever seen before. Naruto would stare at Hiyashi as Hinata's pretty much watching from a side, like trying to kind of peek and see what training he and Naruto and her father were doing together before catching a glimpse of Naruto's Jougan. Naruto would say that they named it the Jougan and that it actually resonates with him. That sounds really similar to something that he heard before regarding to that dojutsu. So I know I said like about 20 minutes ago or like 10 minutes ago that Sakura was the one who ended up naming it. Not exactly. She actually ended up hearing Naruto say something about like Jougan in her sleep. So she just said that to Naruto and ended up taking the credit. Okay, let's just change what happened. So yeah. Anyways, Naruto would end up informing this to Hiyashi, to which Hiyashi would say, very interesting. He would then look at Naruto and say that to learn how to use this dojutsu, he's going to be needing to like be with somebody who can teach him about this stuff. So following the next actual 3 years of the story, this is going to be changing greatly. And when I say greatly, I mean a lot. Do you guys remember when Itachi and Kisame both ended up arriving at the village and they were there to pretty much find Naruto? That whole fight at the bridge would still end up going on, except this time Naruto, instead of being with Jiraiya, would actually be with Hiyashi, and nobody else in the village was pretty much informed of this. This was like top secret information. So they end up like pretty much telling them that Naruto's with Jiraiya. And so Sasuke would actually end up having an encounter with Itachi, having his hatred for Itachi actually doubled. And, you know, Sasuke would end up realizing that he is too weak to kill his brother. So Sasuke would actually, oh my god, that changes so many things. Sasuke would be in a much more bloodlusted state when he was fighting against Kabuto, that realistically speaking, if Sasuke would have hit Kabuto with that Chidori, he probably would have killed them and had like no remorse for it. So that's gonna change a lot in the story, and Kabuto would actually end up getting killed by Sasuke in this version of events, because this Sasuke was just enraged and needed to let some fumes out somehow. So after the battle was over, Tsunade still of course ended up going back to the village, but for the following 3 years, instead of Naruto actually going off to train with Jiraiya and literally only learning a big Rasengan, he would actually end up staying in the village and working on mastering the dojutsu that is the Jougan. At this point, many of you guys might be wondering why I refrained from mentioning the retrieval of Sasuke arc. And the reason for that is because everything ends up changing. Because of the fact that Sasuke ended up going with Jiraiya in order to find Tsunade, the changes that ended up happening to the story is Jiraiya was there to pretty much tell Sasuke not to leave the village. He ended up telling Sasuke the story of Orochimaru and how Orochimaru pretty much left the village in search of power, and that he ended up changing as a person, and Jiraiya tried to bring him back, but he was unsuccessful. He would also tell Sasuke of the fact that leaving the village will not pretty much gain him power, and going about this revenge isn't the best thing, but if he's going to do it, attain the power himself or look for answers. He would kind of give Sasuke this eye-opening like speech, and then when Sasuke was held at like by his throat by Itachi, Jiraiya came in, and like after making Itachi and Kisame run away, he would have actually ended up treating Sasuke, being like, are you okay? Like, I'm sorry about that, I should have been here sooner, you know what I mean? So Sasuke actually gains this sort of respect for Jiraiya. This person is looking after him in a way that Sasuke has never been looked at before. And so this sort of Sasuke and Jiraiya bond would begin forming. And so when the battle against Orochimaru ended up happening and Orochimaru offered to train Sasuke, what ended up happening was Sasuke would end up essentially spitting on Orochimaru's offering, saying that he'll kill Itachi on his own terms. After that battle, they would essentially return to the village, and in this version, Naruto actually ends up staying for the 3 years, and Sasuke is actually the one who ends up going on a training trip with Jiraiya. So there's that. After that ends up happening, Sasuke during those 3 years would actually end up getting really powerful in different aspects than the one that he got powerful with Orochimaru. See, this Sasuke, instead of being cold and like calculated and stuff like that, would actually be a lot more chilled out. He would have like he would kind of have like a little bit of a Boruto era Sasuke vibe, where he's like more calm, you know, he's more like, he'll get down, like, you don't get it twisted, he'll get serious if he has to, but he's more chilled out, and he kind of understands that there's no reason for him to be jealous of anyone's power. He would have also ended up learning the Rasengan due to Jiraiya wanting to teach him it, but Sasuke kind of just sticks to the Chidori because the Rasengan just isn't his style. He would have also ended up learning Sage Mode over these 3 years and also mastered all 5 elements, as well as becoming really powerful and pretty much way more powerful than the Sasuke that we ended up getting in the original. Way more powerful than OG Sasuke, but I reckon that OG Sasuke could probably give this version of Sasuke a run for his money if they were in a one-on-one battle without Sage Mode, mind that. So with that being said, what ends up happening in terms of Naruto's side of things, Naruto would actually end up learning how to use the Jougan over the 3 years. And you guys may be questioning how that just ended up happening. Well, take this in mind. This version of Naruto ended up staying back in the village in order to learn about his dojutsu and in order to essentially master it, because the one thing that Naruto hasn't quite been able to do is master this dojutsu. Through trial and error, they would have ended up finding out that this dojutsu is very or kind of similar to that of the Byakugan. It has a couple of aspects of the Sharingan, and it's kind of a mixture of every jutsu in a sense. Naruto also would have ended up discovering a couple of extra abilities to go along with the ones that he already had, which were pretty much like being able to dodge things and perceive things like normal jutsus, being able to like kind of predict attacks and predict where like teleportation wormholes are coming from, and also teleport himself. Also the ability of producing a lightning from his eye and body in a sense. He would have also ended up learning another 3 abilities. These abilities go as follows. The ability to heal. He would have gained an ability to heal with the powers of the Jougan. He also would have been able to see into the future by 2 seconds. Now I know 2 seconds doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you're in the middle of a fight and you're able to see what your opponent is about to do before they even do it, that makes a world of difference. If you guys have seen the Luffy versus Katakuri fight, then you probably know how much seeing into the future truly matters. And you know, just take Tsunade for example, the guy from My Hero Academia, or Hit from Dragon Ball Super. Those are all examples of how broken that ability to look further into the future is. Not only that, but Naruto would have also started showing signs of manifesting a Susanoo type armor that he's able to kind of cloud himself with. It's a white armor that just kind of goes around him, and he's able to manifest like not exactly the same warrior that the not exactly like a samurai warrior, I believe it is, that the Susanoo manifests, but something else entirely. Something that is a little more broken, but also less at the same time, because he doesn't have full mastery of it. That being said, Naruto also would have been working on learning the Gentle Fist after establishing a bit of a bond with Hiyashi Hyuga. Naruto also would have ended up establishing a huge bond with Hinata, and actually ended up deciding that he kind of had a little bit of a liking towards Hinata. During that entire time, he and Hinata ended up growing closer and closer as friends, with Naruto blissfully unaware of her feelings for him, but there's that, you know, at least now they're on a talking basis, and Hinata is beginning to show more and more her feelings towards Naruto. That being said, Naruto and Hinata would end up pretty much having a pretty cool bond in a sense, and Naruto and Neji would have also ended up becoming a little bit of friends, just because Neji ended up changing as a person. Naruto would have also gotten a lot stronger when it comes to his physical abilities, and over this time Naruto would have also ended up learning how to master a solid 4 out of the 9 Tails' tails. So that's a pretty significant percentage of 9-tails chakra that Naruto can control, and he's able to do insane things with this chakra. He's able to literally stick out Kurama's chakra in a physical manifestation and grab things and like kind of like stretch himself out as a part of himself, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if I'm making it make sense, but that's what I'm trying to get to. Anyways, the explanation of the 3-year time skip turned out way longer than I expected, so getting back to the story, after the 3 years would conclude, Sasuke would end up pretty much arriving back at the village with Jiraiya. When he would do so, Naruto would have actually been visiting Lady Tsunade, and at the same time, Naruto would actually see Sasuke for the first time in 3 years, as Naruto is just ecstatic. They would both actually end up wanting to spar with one another, and so instead of Team 7 having a bell test, what would end up happening is Naruto versus Sasuke. Now, both of them obviously have respect for one another, and they would both bow to each other before performing the sparring hidden leaf hand symbol, and they would both pretty much get distance between each other. Sasuke at this point would look at Naruto before saying not to hold back one bit or else he's gonna be utterly decimated, before Sasuke would close his eyes and open them, revealing the abilities of Sage Mode. Now, this version of Jiraiya actually would have ended up mastering Sage Mode because he ended up going back to Mount Miyaboku with Sasuke, so I mean there was really no point for him not to master it. So that being said, what ends up pretty much happening is Naruto seeing this ability being put on display by Sasuke would end up thinking that's new, before Naruto would end up holding a hand sign with one hand in front of him and the Jougan would activate. At this point, Naruto would pretty much go to reach for his back as he would unsheath a sword, and yeah, he has a sword. Now, some of you guys might be like, hey yo, where did this man get a sword from? It was actually a gift. Where did this gift come from? It was actually Kakashi's old Anbu sword that he used to use back in the day. So Naruto ended up doing a lot of Kenjutsu training, and now Naruto is pretty skilled when it comes to swordsmanship. Sasuke seeing this would actually end up thinking that that's interesting, as he would end up taking his sword out as well, and both of them would look at each other before smiling and then rushing at one another's direction. Naruto would use the Jougan's ability to teleport behind Sasuke, but Sasuke, using his Sage Mode, would sense this, narrowly dodging Naruto's thrust with his sword. At this point, Sasuke would end up throwing a bunch of kunais in the air, pretty much causing distance to be put between himself and Naruto, before Naruto would land on the ground and both of them would rush at each other with their swords, clashing over and over and over again until Naruto kicks Sasuke away and Sasuke would pick his head up, before then like creating a Chidori with one hand and coating his sword with it. Naruto seeing this would think that that's interesting, before he too would pretty much activate that power of the Jougan within himself and he would rush in at Sasuke's direction. At this point, Sasuke would end up actually activating his 3 Tomoe Sharingan, before both of them would rush at each other and they would pretty much end up playing mind games, just kind of slowly easing into the battle. Naruto at one point would also almost get hit by one of Sasuke's attacks, before Naruto would actually use a part of the, similar to a Susanoo's ability, I'm just gonna call it a Susanoo. He would use his own version of the Susanoo to block Sasuke's attack, before Naruto would then actually appear right behind Sasuke and slam a Rasengan right into Sasuke. Psych! That wouldn't happen. Sasuke would turn back around, before then slamming a Chidori, and both their attacks would clash, creating a gigantic explosion. Now, if I'm being honest, Naruto was holding back like a pretty significant amount, just because he wasn't trying to kill Sasuke, but just trying to see how powerful he got. And so the explosion would send both members of Team 7 flying back, before they both would get up and acknowledge each other's strength. At this point, they would both call off the battle, saying that any more of that would get a little too serious, and they would both be kind of like praised for how powerful they've both gotten over the past couple of years. That being said, Naruto would think that Sasuke is definitely a prodigy of his own, but that he's not exactly as powerful as he is. But Sasuke doesn't exactly know that. About 1 week worth of them kind of being in the village and Sasuke getting used to things back in home would go down, before Naruto would eventually be, or no, not Naruto, but Team 7 as a whole would be summoned in front of Lady Tsunade. The team would then immediately be informed of the situation back in the Hidden Sand Village, and they would be informed that the Kazekage of the village hidden in the sand would have been taken by Akatsuki members, Deidara and Sasori. After hearing this, Naruto would immediately remember back to when he fought against Gaara and say that they need to go rescue him. Tsunade would say that that's exactly what they're here to do, and that Team 7 is actually going to be assigned on this rescue mission. Immediately, Team 7 would be told to get their things together before heading to the Hidden Sand, where Lady Chiho would actually encounter Kakashi, believing him to be the White Fang. They would end up having this situation with Kankuro happen, with Sakura trying to pretty much show her usefulness by using her medical ninjutsu skills, before Naruto uses his Jougan's ability to heal people, and he would heal Kankuro back to full health, before then asking him details about what direction they went to. This is when Naruto would actually be given a piece of cloth by Kankuro that was actually part of Sasori's puppets, and Naruto seeing this would say, interesting. Before he would then proceed to tell Team 7 that they need to be on the move now, before Gaara gets taken any further. Naruto would then tell Team 7 to put their hands over his shoulder. As they would all be making physical contact with Naruto, Naruto would use the abilities of the Jougan to pretty much instantly teleport miles in the direction that Kankura pointed to, and he would then arrive about 1 hour away from the mountain in which Gaara would inevitably be located at. When they would arrive, Sakura would immediately punch down the wall, and at this point, Gaara has basically only had 15% of Shukaku removed. When this happens, Deidara would immediately try to fly out with his bird before Naruto would tell Team 7 to handle Sasori and that he is going to be handling Deidara. Sasuke actually being there would make the battle against Sasori way easier, and Sasuke would say, "Don't go hogging all the attention," before he then immediately rushes at Sasori's direction and proceeds to immediately try to use his swordsmanship to take him out. However, Lady Chiho would end up warning about poisons and all that stuff, and she would actually end up guiding Sasuke and Sakura into defeating Sasori, while Naruto at this moment is pretty much chasing after Deidara, who is using his clay bird to fly around. Naruto at this moment would decide that one decisive blow should be all it takes to take care of Deidara, and so he would pretty much be putting up a facade of not being able to catch up to Deidara. Deidara would let this get to his head, inevitably getting cocky, before Naruto would then use his Jougan ability to teleport behind Deidara, as Naruto would land a giant Rasengan on Deidara's body, which would actually send Deidara's body flying into a mountainside before Naruto would land in front of him with the powers of the Kyuubi active in one eye. His aura would be a purple-like aura because blue and red makes purple, I think. I'm pretty sure blue and red makes purple. So, it's a purple aura because the aura of the Jougan and the aura of the Kyuubi kind of mix with each other. And so Naruto would be staring right at Deidara, as Deidara just kind of is scared because Naruto was letting out an insane amount of bloodlust. And at the same moment, Naruto would actually teleporting to a whole different dimension, a pocket dimension, which Naruto would actually throw Deidara into. By the way, Naruto can teleport into different dimensions, mind you. So Deidara being handled would pretty much remain in that place until Naruto would make his way back towards Team 7, to which they would have already finished handling Sasori. After this, they would end up getting intel about meeting Orochimaru by a bridge, and Team 7 would take this into account before then reporting back to Lady Tsunade. After successfully having completed the mission, they would all end up getting suited up and actually end up getting one extra member to go along with them, Yamato. Now, Yamato actually ends up going with them because I want him to, not because he has to. So Team 7 would actually grow in terms of one extra member, and they would end up pretty much arriving at the Tenchi Bridge, where they would encounter Orochimaru, and this version of Orochimaru would be weakened just like he was in the original. And so when this version of Team 7 ends up encountering Orochimaru and everything kind of almost plays out just like in the original, this time when Naruto ends up looking at Orochimaru, Orochimaru would give Sasuke like a maniacal smile, telling Sasuke that he should have went with him and that, he chose the wrong path. Before, Orochimaru then summons Manda and pretty much ends up reverse summoning out of there because Kabuto isn't even there. So he just leaves a different henchman that used the transformation jutsu. He just used another henchman to go meet Sasori. So that henchman gets left behind, and Orochimaru just immediately gets out of that situation, knowing that he was not going to be standing any chance against Sasuke, Naruto, Kakashi, Sakura, and Yamato. So being smart, he ended up pretty much evading the battle, and so they return back to the Hidden Leaf Village, where they all end up planning what they're going to be doing next. When Team 7 arrives back at Konoha, they end up being informed of the death of Asuma. The seriousness of the Akatsuki group finally starts to set in, and Naruto is finally pulled aside by Kakashi and told about the Rasengan and how it's actually an imperfected jutsu, telling Naruto that he believes that if anybody has the ability to master the Rasengan, it's him. Before he then goes on like a 1-week training period where he goes on to master the Rasen Shuriken. With all this going down, finally, Shikamaru's team would actually end up going back to try to ambush Kakuzu and Hidan. and that whole situation would end up playing out just like it does in canon. However, when Naruto ends up hitting the Rasen Shuriken into Kakuzu's body, what ends up going down this time is Naruto would appear in the middle of the battlefield, as he would then be briefed who the enemy targets are, and Naruto would immediately start creating the Rasen Shuriken with 2 clones. Mind you, because he just barely learned how to use the Rasen Shuriken, he doesn't have like 1000% mastery over it, so it is going to be taking him 2 clones to create it. And so Naruto would then pretty much close his eye before he then is teleported right in front of Kakuzu, and he slams the Rasen Shuriken right into Kakuzu, atomizing him. No, not atomizing, but destroying him at a cellular level is more like what Tsunade stated in the original anime. So as this is all happening, Sasuke at this point has pretty much gotten a letter from his big brother Itachi telling him to go alone. And Sasuke, he did just that. He ended up pretty much leaving a note at his house telling everybody that he was going to go off to fight his older brother and that he had to go do this alone, saying sorry if anything goes wrong, but not to worry because Sasuke has been training exactly for this moment. And so when they finally end up seeing this note, Sasuke would have already pretty much ended up, where was I at? I completely stopped the recording. I don't know. I'm just going to keep talking from where I think it was at. So as I was saying, Sasuke would have pretty much ended up informing Team 7 a bit effing late, and everybody would kind of just be like, so Sasuke's gone. Naruto would have a bit of a smirk on his face, saying not to worry, that Sasuke can hold his own against his big brother. He knows Sasuke's powerful. So that would kind of put everybody else's mind at ease. And so it's at this moment that the Sasuke versus the Itachi fight would be going down. Now, I would love to sit here and tell you guys that this fight is so much different than the original, but honestly, I love the original fight. The beginning where they're pretty much playing mind games with each other, they're using genjutsu, then it goes on to shuriken and kunais and stuff like that. That aspect is like the things that being a ninja really is. Being a ninja is like taijutsu, you know, shuriken, not these insane crazy jutsus that like by the end of the series ends up happening. So I genuinely really like the Itachi versus Sasuke fight. So I'm kind of going to be keeping it the same. Another reason that I'm going to kind of be keeping it the same is just due to the fact that Sage Mode in the Curse Mark 2 stage is very, very similar. Now, obviously, Sage Mode is pretty much a completed version of the Curse Mark, and the Curse Mark is just like a whacked like $1 ripoff version of it. But the power boost that Sage Mode gives, while I think it's massive, I don't think it's going to be able to overleap the boundary of Itachi's Susanoo. So when Sasuke inevitably ends up whipping out Kirin and pretty much striking Itachi from the sky with a gigantic lightning dragon, Itachi would still end up staying in that state where he's like pretty much at death's door before tapping Sasuke's forehead and telling him that he loves him and just dying right in front of Sasuke's eyes. Sasuke, seeing his big brother die before him, would have the eternal, no, not the eternal, but the Mangekyo Sharingan activate right at that exact moment. And it is at this point that Sasuke would fall onto one knee and pretty much end up passing out from exhaustion. When Sasuke would inevitably end up waking up, he would come face to face with a man that we would know to be called Madara Uchiha, or somebody that in the future would later be known as Obito Uchiha. So when Sasuke lays his eyes on quote unquote Madara, his what is it called? His big brother Itachi's little Amaterasu thing would go off, and Obito would end up pretty much proceeding to almost die before using Kodo Matsukami. Oh no, not Kodo Matsukami, but the do-over jutsu that all Sharingan users have, and pretty much going back to before that would have ended up even happening. He would then explain to Sasuke that after the battle against Itachi, Obito was there and he decided to take him in, to join the Akatsuki, to be part of that which his brother was a part of, before then going on to explain the truth about Itachi. And when Sasuke hears this, he would like immediately just activate his Mangekyo Sharingan and just start like pretty much being like the Hidden Leaf Village is the cause, you know what I mean? And Obito would then start telling him so many different things, but this is when Sasuke would be like, no, Jiraiya. Like he would start thinking back to Jiraiya and all the good things that happened in the Leaf Village before saying that he doesn't know if this is all true, but he needs to hear someone else tell him this. He's not going to be believing the enemy, and that Jiraiya taught him better than this. Before Obito's smile would disappear and he would say, "I thought you were smarter than this, Sasuke," before he would finally then pretty much end up hitting Sasuke at the back of the head, knocking Sasuke plain out. At this point, Sasuke would be put in a containment cell where he would just be given food and water for the next following week, and this is when Team 7 would finally grow weary of what ended up happening to Sasuke, as they would end up making a rescue team in order to basically get Sasuke back from the clutches of Obito. This team would be assembled of the characters as follows: Naruto Uzumaki, Sakura Haruno, Kakashi Hatake, and Yamato, whatever his last name is, okay? So you guys might be asking, why is Yamato there? I don't know, man. I like Yamato, okay? Get off my back. Anyways though, so the team would actually end up going off and they would end up following Sasuke's tracks, ending up pretty much leading to them realizing that it must have been like some outside force. They would end up doing a little bit of reconnaissance before then finding out that somebody definitely took Sasuke. Now they don't know where or when this all ended up happening, but Naruto just knows one thing, that he's not going to be losing his best friend to something like this. So what they would actually end up doing is pretty much like just sitting here before Naruto would be like, no. And Naruto would pretty much start trying his hardest to sort of like teleport to an area. Naruto at this point would subconsciously start trying to literally teleport to Sasuke. And this is when, you know, the first attempt would fail, the second attempt would fail, and finally, Naruto would actually end up teleporting exactly to Sasuke's area, to which Naruto would actually end up breaking him out of his cell, and Obito, seeing this, would end up actually teleporting right into that spot. If Obito can teleport to precise locations, then I think Naruto should be able to do this with the power of the Jougan, something that is just insanely broken. Naruto, using his ability of the Jougan, would actually end up seeing a portal open right before his eyes, and Obito would appear before them. Now, it's at this moment that they would end up getting into a 5v1 fight with Obito, and honestly, I'm just gonna keep it a buck with you guys. Obito would actually begin the fight by whooping Team 7. Now, even though they're all really strong, none of them are exactly KCM2 Naruto level, and KCM2 Naruto level was just absolutely getting wrecked by Obito until he finally got his Sage of Six Paths amp. So I'm just going to be saying that Obito is actually able to hold his own against Team 7, and when Team 7 actually ends up trying to fight off Obito, you know, they're doing a decent job, but Obito is not exactly losing or winning. So midway through the fight, they would finally end up realizing that Obito's eye is linked with Kakashi, and when they actually end up realizing this, Naruto actually sees a connection between Kakashi's Kamui and Obito's Kamui ability. So Naruto would actually tell Kakashi to use his own ability to teleport himself into that area, or if he can't, Naruto will actually use his Jougan to pretty much hop dimensions, taking Kakashi directly to Obito's pocket dimension. And so Kakashi would actually end up arriving, and every time Obito would use his phasing ability and a part of himself would materialize in his pocket dimension, what Kakashi would actually be able to do is land blows after blows after blows on Obito, and this would start hurting Obito a whole lot, to the point where he would pretty much stop using his phasing ability, and he would actually end up realizing that he is in one hell of a trouble. Like, this is not good at all. At this point, Obito's mask would then be broken and his identity would end up being revealed to Team 7. Kakashi would be the one who takes this revelation the hardest, and when he ends up realizing who Obito is, he and Obito actually end up having a fight in the Kamui dimension, to which Kakashi is actually the one who's victorious, even though he gets a whole metal rod stabbed straight through his, his body. Kakashi still survives. That said, Kakashi would actually, end up hearing Obito's plans and why he did what he did. Obito would tell Kakashi that this accursed world is not something that he wants to consider reality, and that a reality in which Kakashi was not able to save Rin is not a real reality. He would then begin to monologue explaining to Kakashi exactly what it was that happened after the third Great Ninja War, and Kakashi would say, why didn't he come back? But Obito would say he wasn't going to be coming back to a world which Rin did not exist, and which Kakashi was unable to protect neither himself or Rin. And so Kakashi hearing this would actually then be like, damn, that's crazy. Before Naruto's Jougan would finally reach its final state, and he would actually end up teleporting straight into that dimension before telling Kakashi to watch out, as Obito was about to actually land a finishing blow on Kakashi and take him out. But before he could do that, Naruto would come in and hit him with a gigantic Rasen Shuriken, which would actually hit Obito and send him flying. It would deal significant damage to Kakashi. After this, Naruto would actually end up powering up the power of the QB within himself, as he would then shoot a tailed beast bomb straight at Obito's body, which would completely incinerate him on the spot. And afterwards, he would end up going back with Kakashi to the real world, where they would actually end up pretty much all being like, that was a hard battle. And while I may not have made it seem like it was the craziest battle of all, this would definitely mark one of the hardest battles that Naruto would ever have in this series. Jougan Naruto was no joke, keep that in mind. Jougan Naruto has access to so many broken abilities. He has access to teleportation himself, just like Obito does. He has access to lightning. He has access to the white Susanoo. And even with all of that information, Naruto still had a hard time fighting against Obito, which is just incredibly insane. Keep in mind, Obito has a Susanoo as well, and that's why he was able to sort of keep up. Not only that, but this version of Sasuke would even have the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, because Obito did the procedure and actually ended up changing Sasuke's eyes with Itachi's. So the whole team was really strong, and Obito was still able to hold his own against them. That just shows you how insanely OP Obito is. And the only reason they ended up actually winning was because of Naruto's ability to use the Jougan and essentially assess where Obito would be popping up next. When this battle would finally be over, Team 7 would start making their way back to Konoha. However, when they would inevitably end up arriving, they would make it back to none other than a destroyed village. When Naruto sees the sight of Konoha in ruins, immediately the power of the Nine Tails would begin going crazy within himself, and Naruto would actually see the person who did this. Pain would be standing right before him. As Naruto's eyes would turn a crimson-like color, the Jougan would activate, and Naruto would say in an ominous Kurama-like voice, "You did this," before his arm would extend with the Kyuubi's chakra and pretty much proceed to crush one of the paths of pain, before he then goes on an absolute rampage and proceeds to completely utterly destroy the paths of pains. Rasen Shurikens would be flying all over the place, and Naruto would use his teleportation ability to finally make it to the last path of pain, the Diva Path, before he then tries to shoot a Rasen Shuriken straight at him. But the Diva Path would actually use his deflection ability as he shoots Naruto back, and he would then proceed to use Shinra Tensei. As Naruto then starts going crazier and crazier, Naruto would start losing parts of himself, and Naruto would pretty much end up breaking the Shinra Tensei. Now guys, mid-segment in the story, I just want to say really quick, in case there's dogs barking in the background, I'm not sure if you guys are actually going to be able to hear them, or you guys can hear the TV that's playing in the living room. Deepest apologies for that, but I cannot by any means control any of that stuff right now. I ended up deciding that I wasn't going to record the video earlier, and now that I finally want to, there's so much outside noise, and I am just I'm actually really sorry about that. But anyways, getting back to the story, Naruto would then finally close the gap between the Diva Path, and he would actually end up realizing the 5-second cooldown. So after Pain ends up pretty much realizing Naruto realized this, he uses his ability to pretty much suck Naruto in. And when he does this, Naruto would use his Jougan ability to teleport out of there, before he would then coat himself with the abilities of the Jougan's electricity and blitz at Pain as he hits him with a white blade that just literally came out of his hand, similar to that of Goku Black. It was a part of his Susanoo-like ability, and he would have just completely destroyed the Diva Path of Pain before realizing that they're just puppets. He would end up making his way towards the real Pain, but this version of Naruto being completely overtaken by rage would actually end up killing Nagato as well as Konan. And this version of the story would not have a happily ever after where everybody in the village ends up pretty much being revived and nobody actually ends up feeling the brunt of what ended up happening on this day. In this story, the consequences of pained attacks will be felt throughout the village more than just catastrophic events in terms of the buildings and stuff like that. These events will hit them, and death will be very apparent in this series. So the village would then have to start rebuilding the village, and this is when a period of peace would finally start. With the fact that Nagato or Pain has already been taken care of, and Obito was actually taken care of far sooner than the 4th Great Shinobi War would have even started. Sasuke never even ended up going to attack Killer Bee, and a bunch of different events in terms of the domino effect that would have led to the 4th Great Shinobi War didn't happen. This story simply will not work. Without this happening, that can't happen. And so that domino effect of the 4th Great Shinobi War never happens, leading to a huge period of peace and Naruto pretty much ending up getting stronger and stronger, mastering the Jougan completely, unlocking so many more abilities that the Jougan would go on to unlock later on in the story, and pretty much getting way more OP until the day would finally come where Jougan would finally arrive and, you know, he would start folding Naruto, actually killing him, going as far as to actually kill Naruto. That's when Naruto would actually end up meeting the Sage of the Six Paths. And since Sasuke didn't end up dying, and Naruto's pretty much the only one who can actually deal with this guy, Hagoromo would end up bestowing Naruto both of his the yin and yang half of his power, leading to an insane boost of power for Naruto. And Kurama would then actually pretty much this time now already establish a relationship that's good with Naruto, so he would end up going into his KCM state, using his Sage of the Six Paths boost, and then trying to fight against Jougan. But even with all that and his dojutsu, it simply feels like they're kind of being stalemated, like the battle feels kind of even. So to kind of like start making up for this difference, Kurama would actually end up saying that they can use Baryon mode, and so they would do so, completely stopping the catastrophic events that would follow after this day. Jougan would be defeated. I forgot to mention, but Toneri would have also been defeated. Naruto would have inevitably ended up getting with Hinata. Boruto would have been born, and a lot of heavy casualties that would have happened in the future would be stopped, thanks to the actions of one person, Boruto Uzumaki, the savior, the man that comes from the future. Similar to what future Trunks was to the Dragon Ball Z main timeline, is literally what Boruto would be. Boruto unknowingly literally saved the Great Shinobi world, and had it not been for that, the story of what if Naruto had the Jougan would have never came to pass. Before the story ends, I just want to say a huge thanks to both of you guys who actually ended up pitching your ideas into the story and helping start this great what if that was, what if Naruto had the Jougan. Without fans like you guys, things like this just wouldn't be possible. And I also want to tell you guys all that the winner of the giveaway will be announced tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to be commenting under one of you guys' posts and letting you guys know who it was that won. Make sure you guys have a really cool PFP and a cool name, and that'll probably heighten your chances of winning. And make sure you comment on all of the latest couple of videos. I'm going to be making sure that the person that wins is, you know, a consistent viewer, you know what I mean? So that being said, yes, I know there's gonna be a little bit of bias, just a little, matter of fact, no bias. I'm just going to random video and click on somebody, okay? Because no bias on this channel. So yeah, that pretty much ends up concluding today's story. If you enjoyed it, leave a like. If you didn't, then let me know what I could improve on further occasions, and that will be wrapping up the story of what if Naruto had the Jougan. I hope you guys went on to enjoy it. Peace.